The courtroom was silent, suffocating. On the stand, Ilara Hayes, a wife fighting for her life, could barely speak. Her husband, the charismatic politician Marcus Hayes, watched her with fake concern, while his mistress Chloe sat behind him, smirking. Ilara's lawyer was losing. The evidence was all stacked against her. Then, as the pressure mounted, Ilara's eyes rolled back and she collapsed unconscious. Chloe's smirk widened. She had won, but she didn't know about Judge Reed, and she didn't know about the secret recording the judge was about to play. A recording that would change everything. The polished mahogany of Courtroom 3B did nothing to warm the chill in Ilara Hayes's bones. It was a cold that had settled deep inside her over the last 6 months, a creeping foggy frost that dulled her thoughts and weighed down her limbs. She sat at the defendant's table. Though this was a divorce proceeding, it felt entirely criminal, and gripped the oak railing to steady herself. "Mrs. Hayes, if you could please focus." The voice belonged to Benjamin Croft, her husband's lawyer. He was a shark in a $5,000 suit, all predatory angles, and a voice that managed to be both smooth and serrated. I am focusing," Ilara murmured, her voice sounding thin even to her own ears. The fluorescent lights of the courtroom hummed, and the sound seemed to drill into her skull. "Are you—" Croft paced perfectly comfortable. "Because you seem to be having trouble recalling a simple fact. Let's try again. On the night of October 14th, your husband, Councilman Hayes, was at the Mayor's Gala, a crucial fundraising event. You were scheduled to be at his side. You did not attend. Can you tell the court why—" Ilara blinked, trying to pull the memory from the fog. October 14th. It was blurry. I was unwell." "Unwell," Croft repeated, as if tasting the word. "The same unwellness that caused you to miss the children's hospital benefit. The same unwellness that led you to accuse your husband of," and I quote from your text message, "dancing with that skeletal witch." The gallery packed with reporters sniffing out the scandal of Councilman Marcus Hayes's messy divorce tittered. That skeletal witch, as you so charmingly put it, was Chloe Vance. Croft continued, gesturing to the front row. Ilara's eyes were pulled as if by a magnet to the other woman. Chloe Vance. 28 years old, sleek as a panther, and currently serving as Marcus's chief of staff. She sat just behind Marcus, her sharp, beautiful face a mask of polite concern. But her eyes were knives. They met Ilara's, and for a split second, a tiny, triumphant smile played at the corners of her mouth. Ilara's own lawyer, Arthur Calloway, a good man but clearly outgunned, rose to his feet. "Objection, Your Honor. Mr. Croft is badgering my client." "It's cross-examination, Mr. Calloway. He's allowed some latitude." Judge Evelyn Reed said, her voice dry. Judge Reed was a formidable presence, a woman in her 60s who had seen every lie a human could tell. "But Mr. Croft, get to the point." "The point, Your Honor," Croft said, turning back to Ilara, "is that Mrs. Hayes's unwellness is not a medical condition. It is a bottle, or to be precise, many bottles." Gasps. Arthur shot up again. "Objection. That is a baseless and inflammatory accusation." "Is it?" Croft snapped, walking to his table and picking up a glossy 8x10 photo. "I submit Exhibit D, a photograph taken by Mr. Hayes on October 14th, after he returned from the gala." The bailiff handed the photo to Ilara. She stared at it. It was her in her kitchen, but not as she remembered. She was slumped at the table. hair matted a bottle of vodka. Her husband's preferred brand, not hers, standing next to a half-empty glass. I don't drink vodka, she whispered, shaking. I never have. Mrs. Hayes, you are under oath, Croft said, his voice laced with false pity. We have 3 months of credit card statements showing escalating purchases from liquor stores. We have photographs. We have your husband's testimony given with a heavy heart that your alcoholism has made you erratic, paranoid, and, frankly, incompetent. Incompetent. That was the word. Marcus wasn't just divorcing her. He was petitioning to have all marital assets put under his control, arguing that she was mentally unfit to manage her own finances. He was claiming she was a danger to herself. Marcus, please, Elara said, turning to her husband. Marcus Hayes, the charismatic man of the people, finally looked at her. His handsome face was a mask of profound sadness, an Oscar-worthy performance. Elara, darling, I'm so worried about you. We're all trying to help. Behind him, Chloe Vance dipped her head, as if in silent prayer for Elara's soul. Elara's vision tunneled. The air was thick. She couldn't breathe. This wasn't real. She hadn't bought that alcohol. She hadn't sent that text. She remembered being sick, a debilitating vertigo, and a metallic taste in her mouth. But the more she tried to explain the sickness, the fogginess that had stolen her memories, the more unstable she sounded. My client has been seeing doctors, Arthur Calloway stammered, shuffling papers. They can't find a cause. They suspect chronic fatigue or a guilty conscience, Croft shot back. Your Honor, Mrs. Hayes has systematically tried to sabotage her husband's mayoral campaign, wasted marital assets, and is now putting on this pathetic display. We ask for the petition to be granted. Judge Reed looked at Elara, her gaze sharp and analytical. Mrs. Hayes, do you have anything to say to this? Elara opened her mouth. She needed to fight. She needed to tell them about the real Marcus, the man whose eyes went cold when the cameras were off. The man who just last week had calmly told her, "No one will ever believe you, Elara. You're a mess. I'm the future." But all that came out was a strangled sob. The room was tilting. The hum of the lights was now a roar. She looked at Chloe, at that perfectly sculpted face. And Chloe? Chloe smiled. It wasn't a small smirk this time. It was a wide, glorious, triumphant beam. A smile that said, "You're finished. It's over. He's mine. Everything is mine." That smile was the last thing Elara Hayes saw before the world dissolved into blackness. The sound of a body hitting the floor was a sickening, hollow thump. "Elara!" Marcus Hayes roared, leaping from his seat with the agility of a man half his age. He scrambled past the bar, his face a perfect picture of terror and anguish, pushing past Arthur Calloway, who was frozen in shock. "Bailiff, medical assistance, now." Judge Reed's voice cut through the ensuing chaos like a steel blade, her authority absolute. The courtroom exploded. Reporters in the back gallery scrambled for their phones' flashbulbs, which were strictly forbidden, popped, and the gavel slammed down. Crack, crack, crack. "Order, order in this court. Bailiff, clear the gallery. This court is in recess." Marcus was already on his knees beside Elara's still form. "Elara, honey, wake up! Please, wake up!" He looked up at Judge Reed, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. "Your Honor, see, this is what I've been talking about. She's not well. She's so sick." Benjamin Croft. His lawyer was already at his side, placing a supportive hand on his shoulder. Your Honor, in light of my client's clear distress and his wife's episode, we move for an immediate summary judgment on the competency petition. Get a grip, Mr. Croft. Judge Reed snapped her eyes not on Marcus or Ilara, but on the EMTs rushing through the side door. Your motion is noted, and for now denied. My only concern is for Mrs. Hayes' immediate health. Arthur Calloway, finally moving, knelt on the other side of Ilara. Ilara, can you hear me? Her face was ashen, her breathing terrifyingly shallow. As the EMTs began working, assessing her vitals, and strapping an oxygen mask to her face, Marcus stood up, running a hand through his perfect hair. He looked for all the world like a man tragically besieged. He turned his back to the judge and his own lawyer, and his eyes found Chloe Vance. Chloe had not moved. She remained seated, a vision of composure. The chaos of the room, the shouting reporters, the stern bailiffs, the medical emergency did not touch her. She was the still center of the hurricane. Her mask of polite concern had slipped back into place, but her eyes were still blazing with victory. Marcus looked at her, and his mask of anguished husband wavered for a microsecond. He gave her the smallest, almost imperceptible nod, a nod that said, "It's working." And Chloe allowed herself a tiny private intake of breath. She looked down at her clasped hands as if to hide the tremor of adrenaline. She had done it. She and Marcus had planned for every contingency, but this was better than they could have hoped. Ilara hadn't just seemed unstable. She had proven it in front of a judge and the media. No judge would give a woman who faints on the stand control of a multi-million-dollar estate. No one would ever believe Ilara's wild accusations now. They had won. The mayoral race was secure. The money was secure. Their future was secure. The EMTs loaded Ilara onto a gurney. As they wheeled her out, Marcus made to follow. "I must go with her," he said to the judge. "No, Mr. Hayes, you will not," Judge Reed said. Her voice was flat. "You are a party to this hearing, not her medical proxy. You will remain. Mr. Calloway, you may accompany your client to the hospital." Arthur Calloway, looking pale and utterly defeated, nodded and rushed out after the gurney. Marcus's face darkened. "But, Your Honor, she's my wife." "A wife you are actively painting as an incompetent alcoholic in open court," Judge Reed said, her eyes narrowing. "You'll stay. I want a word with both legal teams in my chambers. Now." The judge swept from the bench, her black robes flowing. Left alone in the suddenly silent courtroom, Marcus turned to Chloe. The act was over. His face was hard. "She picked a great time to prove our point," Chloe whispered, standing and moving to his side, subtly adjusting his tie as a chief of staff would. But her touch lingered. "Croft was pushing too hard," Marcus muttered. "It almost looked like bullying." "No," Chloe said, her voice a low, confident purr. "It looked like the truth. The pressure of her lies finally made her crack. It's the perfect narrative." She squeezed his arm. "It's finally over, Marcus. She's just a sad footnote." Marcus looked at the door Ilara had been wheeled through. For a second, a flicker of something guilt-fear passed through his eyes. But then Chloe touched his cheek, and it was gone. He was Councilman Hayes again. "You're right," he said, straightening his suit. "Let's go see what the old dragon wants." They didn't see the bailiff at the back of the room who had been watching them. And they certainly didn't see the way Judge Reed, who had paused in the doorway to her chambers, observed the intimate touch, the whispered words, and the cold, satisfied look that had replaced Marcus's grief. Judge Reed had seen a lot of things in 30 years, and she knew with absolute certainty that she had not just seen a grieving husband and a concerned employee. She had just seen two co-conspirators. and she was not going to let this go. Judge Evelyn Reed's chambers were not like the courtroom. Where the court was dark wood and high ceilings designed to intimidate, her chambers were functional, packed with law books, and smelled faintly of lemon-scented polish and old paper. She sat at her desk, her computer monitor on, and waited. Croft and Marcus entered first, all bluster and male confidence. Chloe followed holding a tablet, the perfect picture of efficiency. She made a show of remaining by the door, as if she, a humble staffer, didn't belong in such a high-level meeting. "Sit," Judge Reed commanded, not unkindly. "Ms. Vance, you too. You are clearly a party of interest in this performance." Chloe's eyes flashed, but she sat demurely next to Mr. Croft. "Your Honor," Croft began, "if this is about the summary judgment, I must insist—" "It is not, Mr. Croft," the judge interrupted. "It's about the health of Mrs. Hayes. I have the EMT's initial report. Her blood pressure is dangerously low and she's unresponsive." "See," Marcus interjected, leaning forward with practiced sincerity. "It's the toll of the drinking. Her body is just giving out. It's why I had to intervene." Judge Reed stared at him. She stared for a long, uncomfortable 10 seconds. "Mr. Hayes, your concern is noted. Now, let's talk about what's really happening. While the EMTs were working, I had a thought." She swiveled in her chair to face her computer. "I'm a thorough woman, Mr. Croft. I read all submissions, and Mr. Calloway, bless his disorganized heart, submitted over 300 pages of medical records from Mrs. Hayes. He was trying to prove she was sick to counter your alcoholism narrative. He failed to make a coherent point, but I read the records." She clicked her mouse. "Gastroenterologists, neurologists, endocrinologists, allergists. For 6 months, Elara Hayes has been telling doctors she's dizzy, fatigued, confused, and has a metallic taste in her mouth. Every single one of them ran standard bloods. Every single one of them came back normal. They all eventually diagnosed her with anxiety or stress." "Exactly," Croft said, shrugging. "The stress of her own lies. Or," Judge Reed said, her voice dropping, "the stress of being slowly poisoned." The air in the room went still. Marcus Hayes let out a short, barking laugh. "Poisoned, Your Honor, that's absurd. That's the kind of paranoid fantasy Elara would— Oh." He stopped, realizing his mistake. He'd just called the judge paranoid. Chloe's face went white. Not pale. White. A stark, papery white that made her skin look like a mask. "It's an interesting theory," Judge Reed continued, as if she hadn't noticed their reactions. "So when Mrs. Hayes fainted, I took the liberty of calling the hospital, St. Jude's. I spoke to the ER attending, and given her symptoms, her unresponsive state, and the context, I didn't order a standard toxicology screen. I ordered a full-panel heavy metal and atypical compounds test." Croft was on his feet. "Your Honor, you have no basis. That is a complete overreach of judicial authority. You are prejudicing this case." "Sit down, Mr. Croft," Judge Reed said, her voice ice. "I am a judge, but I am also a citizen. I see a woman collapse in my courtroom. I am entitled to be concerned. And when that woman's husband and his staffer look like they've just won the lottery instead of perhaps witnessing a tragedy, my concern heightens." Marcus's face was now a mask of rage. "How dare you? I love my wife." "Do you?" Judge Reed said. "We'll find out, because the test results are being rushed, but there's something else." She reached into her desk drawer and pulled out a simple padded manila envelope. It had no return address. It was postmarked 2 weeks ago. "This arrived at my chambers," she said, tapping it. addressed to me personally. In the interest of justice, Hayes divorce. I receive crank mail all the time. I almost threw it out. She opened the clasp and slid out a single, small, black USB thumb drive. I viewed its contents in a secure environment. I thought it was a hoax, a deepfake, as the kids say. It was disturbing. And more importantly, it was completely inadmissible. Chloe Vance, who had been frozen, suddenly made a small noise, a tiny gasp. Her eyes were locked on the thumb drive. It was fruit of the poisonous tree, as you know, Mr. Croft, Judge Reed said. A recording made without the consent of all parties. Potentially illegal. Definitely inadmissible. I couldn't use it. I couldn't mention it. She held up the thumb drive. I couldn't until 10 minutes ago. What do you mean? Marcus said, his voice now a strained whisper. I mean, said Judge Reed, her eyes locking on him, that this recording alleges a very specific, very unusual crime. A crime that would produce a very specific, very unusual set of symptoms. Symptoms like dizziness, memory fog, confusion, and a metallic taste. Symptoms that would, in a high-stress environment, cause a person's system to simply crash. She stood up. The evidence on this drive was unusable until it was corroborated by an independent, legally obtained piece of evidence, like, for instance, a blood test from St. Jude's Hospital, the one I just ordered. She walked to the door. Court will resume in 1 hour. I am having Mrs. Hayes's hospital reports piped directly to my monitor by court order. And if they show anything, and I mean anything, that corroborates the contents of this drive, I am reopening the case. Not as a divorce proceeding, but as a criminal one. She looked at Chloe. Ms. Vance, you look ill. Perhaps you should get some water. The color was flooding back to Chloe's face in splotchy red patches. I'm fine, Your Honor. Good. Judge Reed opened the door. Mr. Croft, Mr. Hayes, I'll see you in court. As they filed out, Marcus grabbed Chloe's arm, his fingers digging in. What is on that drive? He hissed. I don't know, she whispered back, her voice shaking. It can't be. He said he handled it. He said the PI was gone. Who? Marcus demanded. David Chen. Chloe breathed her eyes wide with a new dawning horror. The PI Ilara hired. The one who bugged your office. I thought you said he lost his license and all his evidence. Marcus's face went gray. He remembered. The PI David Chen. The ex-cop. He had been handled. His office was ransacked. He was threatened. He'd been reported to the state board on a trumped-up charge. He couldn't have any evidence. Unless he'd made a copy. He's bluffing, Marcus said more to himself than to Chloe. She's bluffing. The old witch is bluffing. But as he walked back to the courtroom for the first time in his life, the man of the gilded people was sweating. David Chen was not in the courtroom. He was 2 blocks away, sitting in a windowless office above a check-cashing place, nursing a lukewarm coffee. His PI license was indeed suspended. His career was for all intents and purposes over. It had all started 6 weeks ago. Ilara Hayes had hired him. She'd been different then. Foggier than she was now, but still sharp. I think my husband is cheating on me, she'd said, her hands twisting in her lap. But it's more than that. I think he's glad that I'm sick. Sick? David had asked. I can't explain it, she'd whispered. I'm just disappearing, and he just watches me, he and his new assistant. David Chen had been a cop for 20 years. He knew a victim when he saw one. He also knew a predator. Getting the photos of Marcus and Chloe was easy. A cliché. A fancy dinner at Ambrose, a 5-star hotel check-in. He had the case wrapped in 48 hours. But Ilara's words haunted him. He's glad that I'm sick. So David did something illegal. He planted a bug. Not in the home that was too risky, but in Marcus's public-facing office at the city council building. He justified it as a public interest measure. This man was running for mayor. For a week, he got nothing but boring city planning meetings. Then one night late, he got the jackpot. He was listening live, a pair of high-end headphones clamped to his ears, when Chloe Vance's voice came through clear as a bell. He'd recorded it all. And he'd been horrified. This wasn't just adultery. He didn't even have a word for it. It was methodical, cold-blooded psychological and physical torture. 2 days later, his office was tossed. Not a burglary, a pro job. Computers wiped, files gone. The next day, an emergency hearing with the state licensing board was called. A former client, a plant David knew, claimed David had blackmailed him. His license was suspended pending investigation. They'd been thorough. They'd taken everything. But they hadn't counted on his paranoia. David was ex-homicide. He always kept a backup. A single encrypted micro SD card, which he'd immediately transferred to a nondescript USB drive. He couldn't go to the cops. Marcus had the city police in his pocket. He couldn't go to the press. They'd eat him alive with no license and illegally obtained evidence. They'd call him a disgruntled, disgraced PI trying to shake down a politician. He had one play, a Hail Mary. He knew Judge Evelyn Reed by reputation. She was tough, but she was rumored to have a soft spot for justice. A real one. He typed the label. In the interest of justice. He mailed it with no return address from a post box 3 towns over. And then he waited. For 2 weeks, he heard nothing. He watched the news, saw the divorce proceedings start, and his heart sank. He saw pictures of Ilara Hayes looking frail and confused, and he felt a cold sickness in his own gut. He had failed. The judge had thrown it out. Then 15 minutes ago, his phone buzzed. A burner phone he'd set up with only one number in it. Arthur Calloway, Ilara's lawyer. Calloway hadn't known what to make of David, but David had given him the phone just in case. The text was simple, sent in a panic by Calloway from the hospital. Ilara fainted in court. Judge Reed is back in chambers. She's ripping into Marcus and Croft. Something is happening. David's heart hammered. He grabbed his jacket. It was time to stop hiding. He might not have a license, but he was still a witness. He walked out of his office and headed for the courthouse. He wouldn't go inside. Not yet. He'd wait on the steps. Back in courtroom 3B, the atmosphere was electric. The gallery, which Judge Reed had allowed to be refilled, was standing room only. Reporters were practically vibrating. Marcus and Chloe were at their table, a 2-foot gap of cold animosity between them. Marcus was whispering furiously to Ben Croft, who just kept shaking his head, his face grim. Arthur Calloway was back, having left Ilara in a stable condition at the hospital. He looked baffled, but a new tiny spark of hope was in his eyes. She's conscious, he'd whispered to Judge Reed when he returned. She's asking what happened. The doctor said her blood work is highly anomalous. They're waiting on the specific panel. Judge Reed had nodded. Thank you, Mr. Calloway. Take your seat. The judge slammed her gavel. The room fell silent. We are back on the record, Judge Reed announced. Before the Interruption. We were hearing Mr. Croft's arguments regarding Mrs. Hayes's competency. A compelling case was being made that Mrs. Hayes is paranoid, delusional, and a danger to herself. She paused, looking directly at Marcus. However, she continued, a new piece of evidence has been presented to this court. It is unusual. It is a recording which was submitted anonymously. I had until now ruled it inadmissible, but new information has come to light which directly corroborates the claims made in this recording. Croft shot to his feet. Your Honor. What information? We have a right to see. You will, Mr. Croft, the judge said. A fax machine in the corner of her dais whirred to life. The bailiff walked over, retrieved a single sheet of paper, and handed it to her. Judge Reed read the paper. Her face, already stern, became a mask of cold fury. She looked up. She looked at Marcus. She looked at Chloe. The information, Mr. Croft, she said, her voice shaking with controlled rage, is the preliminary toxicology report from St. Jude's Hospital. Mrs. Hayes's blood contains elevated levels of lithium orotate. Not the prescription kind, but the wellness supplement kind. And traces of 2 other non-prescribed psychoactive compounds, one of which is a binder commonly used to mask heavy metals. Chloe Vance made a sound. A small, desperate animal sound which she choked off immediately. This court, Judge Reed said, is no longer ruling on a divorce. We are now in a fact-finding hearing for a potential criminal matter. This is an outrage, Marcus bellowed, finding his voice. This is a setup. Is it Mr. Hayes? Judge Reed said. Let's find out. She looked at the bailiff. You may play the recording. Your Honor, I object. This is illegal. It's... Croft was yelling, but Judge Reed ignored him. The objection is noted, Mr. Croft, and it is overruled. The health and safety of a citizen of this state supersede your client's privacy. Play it. The bailiff hit a key. A large speaker hooked up to the court's AV system clicked on. A hiss of static. And then, Chloe's voice. Clear, sharp, and impatient. The smile was gone. The silence in the courtroom was absolute. It was so quiet that the pop and hiss of the audio feed before the voices began sounded like gunshots. Then, it started. Chloe's voice. She's still not getting worse fast enough. Marcus, are you sure you're using the full dose? A gasp went through the gallery. Ben Croft turned and stared at his client, his mouth open in Marcus's voice. I'm using exactly what you told me. 2 drops of the binder in her morning tea and a full capsule of the lithium broken into her wellness smoothie. She said it tasted off yesterday. Chloe's voice, scoffing. Let it taste off. She's so fogged she'll forget by lunchtime. The doctor just told her it was pre-menopausal stress again. He's literally doing our work for us. She's pathetic. Marcus's voice. It feels... She's still my wife, Chloe. She looked so lost this morning. Chloe's voice, her voice turning to ice. Was she lost when she was holding you back? Was she lost when she didn't understand the demands of your campaign? She's not your wife, Marcus. She's a problem, and we are solving it. The sooner she's declared incompetent, the sooner we can move her into that wellness center in Arizona and get control of the finances. The campaign is bleeding money. In the courtroom, Chloe Vance was shaking her head. No, that's not. But her voice was drowned out by her own voice on the recording. Marcus's voice. And the PI David Chen. He was at Ambrose. I saw him. Chloe's voice. Sudden, sharp fear. What, you're sure? Marcus's voice. I'm sure, He was pretending to read a newspaper. He's good, but I'm better. Chloe's voice. Okay, don't panic. He's just getting infidelity. That's fine. That's just a messy divorce. He can't know about the other thing. No one knows. It's just supplements, right? Marcus's voice. A dark, humorless laugh. Right. Supplements. My love supplements don't give you memory loss, vertigo, and chronic untraceable nausea. But stress does. And as long as everyone thinks she's a stressed, paranoid alcoholic, we're golden. Chloe's voice. We need to handle the PI. Now, Marcus. Before he handles us. Marcus's voice. I've already made the call. A friend at the state board. We'll plant a little complaint. Blackmail. Something dirty. We'll ruin his reputation, suspend his license. By the time he surfaces, all his evidence will be the ravings of a disgraced hack. No one will ever believe him. Just like no one will ever believe her. The recording continued. It was 12 minutes long. 12 minutes of pure sociopathic planning. They discussed the specific brand of lithium orotate chosen because it was all natural and wouldn't show up on a standard drug test. They discussed the heavy metal binder, a Russian supplement Chloe had found online, guaranteed to clear the mind, but known to cause neurological fog in high doses. They laughed. They laughed about the time Ilara had gotten lost driving home from the grocery store she'd been going to for 15 years. Did you see her face? Marcus said on the tape, and in the courtroom his real-life face was a mask of gray terror. She actually apologized to me for worrying me. To us, Chloe's voice corrected. To the mayorship, to the only Mrs. Hayes. A sound of a glass clinking. The recording ended. The silence that followed was heavier, more suffocating than any sound. Ben Croft, Marcus's shark of a lawyer, slowly sat down. He looked at his hands. He was a man who had defended murderers and thieves. But this was different. He looked dirty. Chloe Vance was frozen. The smirk, the smile, the triumph. All of it was gone, burned away. She was just a small, terrified woman, her eyes locked on Judge Reed. She opened her mouth, and a tiny squeaking sound came out. That's a fake, she whispered. A deep fake. Voice actors. They're framing us. She's framing us, Ilara. Marcus seized on the word. Yes, a fake. That's not me, Your Honor. This is a desperate lie from a very sick woman. Judge Reed watched them. She didn't look at the recording. She didn't look at the press. She just watched the two of them unravel. A deepfake, Judge Reed repeated, her voice neutral. That's your defense? A very elaborate 12-minute deepfake submitted 2 weeks ago, which just happened to perfectly predict the exact, and I quote, highly anomalous toxicology report from St. Jude's Hospital that just landed on my desk. She held up the facts. A report which confirms the presence of the specific non-prescription compounds you were just heard deeply faking a discussion about. She turned to the bailiff. Bailiff, I believe the district attorney's office has an observer in the gallery. Would you please ask him to join us? A man in a suit at the back stood up. He was already on his phone. And, Judge Reed continued, her voice rising to a crescendo of righteous fury, bailiff, please take Mr. Marcus Hayes and Ms. Chloe Vance into custody. No, Marcus roared. It was a primal scream of disbelief of a king being dethroned. You can't. I am a city councilman. You're ruining me. You did that yourself, Mr. Hayes, Judge Reed said as the bailiffs moved in. Chloe didn't scream. She didn't move. She just sat there. her world evaporating. As the female bailiff gently but firmly put her hands behind her back, Chloe finally looked up. Her eyes found the gallery, found the flashing cameras that were no longer adoring but condemning. She had gotten everything she wanted. And in the space of 12 minutes, she had lost it all. The first thing Elara noticed was the silence. Not the humming, oppressive silence of the courtroom, or the thick, tension-filled silence of her home. This was a clean, sterile silence, broken only by the quiet, rhythmic beep of a machine beside her. The second thing she noticed was the clarity. The fog, the thick cotton wool fog that had lived in her brain for 6 months, was thinner. It was still there at the edges, but she could think. The metallic taste in her mouth was gone, replaced by the antiseptic dryness of a hospital. She opened her eyes. Elara, you're awake. Arthur Calloway was sitting in a chair by her bed. He looked exhausted. His tie was undone, but he was smiling. A real, genuine smile. Arthur, she rasped. Her throat was sore. What happened? I fainted. I lost. Didn't I? You fainted, Arthur said, leaning forward and taking her hand. His was warm. But Elara, you didn't lose. He began to talk. He told her everything. The judge's suspicion, the secret anonymous thumb drive, the phone call to the hospital, the toxicology report. And then, the recording. Elara listened, her eyes growing wider. The fog wasn't just thinner. It was being burned away by the white-hot light of the truth. The tea, she whispered. My wellness smoothie. He made it for me. Every morning. He said he was taking care of me. Yes, Arthur said, his voice grim. He was. And Chloe, they were in it together, from the start. The gaslighting, the lost memories, the liquor. Elara, they were systematically poisoning you. Not to kill you, the DA thinks, but to control you. To have you declared mentally incompetent so they could take everything and lock you away. Elara began to cry. But they weren't the tears of a victim. They weren't the confused, hopeless sobs of the past 6 months. They were tears of rage, tears of relief, tears of a woman who had just been pulled back from the edge of a cliff. They're arrested, Arthur said. Judge Reed had them taken into custody right from the courtroom. Conspiracy to commit. Well, a lot of things. Attempted assault, fraud, perjury. The list is long. The DA is having a field day. Councilman Hayes's career is over. Chloe Vance's. Life as she knows it is over. The recording, Elara said, her mind, her clear mind, working. Where did the judge get it? A PI, Arthur said. A man named David Chen. The one you hired. But I thought he vanished, Elara said. They vanished him. Suspended his license, ruined him. But he was smart. He kept one copy. He sent it to the judge. He took a huge risk. He's a hero, Elara. A knock on the door. A uniformed police officer. And behind him, David Chen. David looked older than she remembered. Tired, but he stood tall. Mrs. Hayes, he said, his voice quiet. I'm so sorry I couldn't stop it sooner. Elara looked at this man. This disgraced, broken man who had saved her. Who had believed her when no one else would, when she hadn't even believed herself. She pushed herself up on her elbows. Mr. Chen, she said, her voice stronger than she'd heard it in a year. You didn't just stop it. You finished it. Thank you. David Chen nodded, a small, sad smile on his face. The DA is dropping the charges against me. And, Judge Reed mentioned something about judicial commendation. My license should be back by Monday. Elara lay back against the pillow. The beep of the heart monitor was steady. Strong. She was free. She had been in a cage. A gilded cage built by her husband and locked by his mistress. They had tried to convince her she was the one who was sick. They had tried to convince her she was crazy. They had smiled and smirked as she faded away. But they had underestimated her. They had underestimated David Chen. And they had most definitely underestimated Judge Evelyn Reed. Arthur, Elara set her eyes on the sterile white ceiling. Yes, Elara. When I'm discharged, I want you to file a new suit. Not a divorce. An annulment on the grounds of fraud. And then, I want you to file the biggest civil suit this city has ever seen. I want to take everything. Arthur Calloway, for the first time in a month, laughed. I think that can be arranged, Elara. She closed her eyes. Not in exhaustion, but in preparation. The fog was gone. Elara Hayes was back. The fallout was not a wave, it was an atomic blast, and the courtroom where Judge Reed had dropped the bomb was ground zero. The City Herald's front-page headline was a single four-letter word set in 90-point font, poison. Beneath it, a side-by-side photo, Councilman Marcus Hayes, smiling and waving on the campaign trail, next to the gray, slack-jawed mugshot taken just hours before. The story, which included a full verified transcript of the 12-minute recording, eviscerated the city's golden couple. The political fallout was immediate and absolute. The mayor, a man who had staked his own re-election on endorsing Marcus, held a stammering, sweaty-palmed press conference. I am appalled, sickened. This is not the man I knew. This is a betrayal, a sickness, a depraved act that the party, we disavow. Completely. In his 50th floor office, Benjamin Croft the shark was looking at his own hands. He had known in his gut that Marcus was a liar. He was paid to defend liars. But this was different. He hadn't been a lawyer. He'd been an accessory. He'd been the tool a monster used to try and bury his wife. The dirt, he felt, wasn't just metaphorical. He buzzed his secretary. Diane, take a release. Effective immediately, I, Benjamin Croft, and my firm are resigning as counsel for Mr. Marcus Hayes, citing a fundamental and irreparable breakdown in the attorney-client relationship. We will be cooperating fully with the district attorney's office. The DA, a young, razor-sharp woman named Sarah Jennings, saw the case for what it was, the case of a lifetime. She stood before the same bank of microphones that had just destroyed the mayor, but she was a vision of cold, righteous fire. This is not a messy divorce, she'd declared, her voice ringing with authority. This is a case of cold, calculated, attempted destruction. This was not a crime of passion. It was a crime of power. And in this city under my watch, we do not tolerate those who prey on the vulnerable. We will be seeking the maximum possible charges. Elara was not at the arraignment. She watched it on a small television bolted to the wall of her hospital room. She was free of the fog, but her body was in revolt. The detox was agonizing. Her nerves, long since dulled by the chemical cocktail, were now screaming. She had splitting migraines, her hands shook, and she was haunted by nightmares that were not dreams, but simply memories. On the screen, she watched Marcus and Chloe shuffle in. The orange jumpsuits hung on them, ill-fitting and clownish. Marcus, the man of the people, was unshaven, his famous hair matted and greasy. Chloe, the sleek, panther-like woman, was pale, her sharp features now just looking skeletal, her hair pulled back in a lank, joyless ponytail. They were shackled. The sound was muted on the TV, but Alara didn't need to hear it. She watched their eyes. As they were led to the defendant's box, their gazes met. It wasn't just loathing. It was a silent, venomous conversation. "You did this to me. You were supposed to be smarter. You failed." The poison they had brewed for Alara had finally fatally poisoned them against each other. D.A. Jennings was arguing for no bail. "Your Honor, these are not just flight risks. They are, as we have proven, manipulative wealthy and have a depraved indifference to human life and the rule of law. They have already proven they will use their resources to destroy evidence and people. To release them would be an insult to their victim and a danger to the community." The judge, a new one for the criminal case, agreed. Bail was set at $5 million each. Cash. A new emergency order, this one from Judge Reed in the Civil Division, had already frozen every asset, every account, every line of credit. The house was seized. The cars were impounded. The joint accounts were locked. They couldn't have made bail if it was $5. Alara watched the female bailiff lead Chloe away. The smirk was gone. The triumph was gone. There was nothing left. Just an empty, terrified girl. Alara felt nothing. Not pity. Not rage. Just a vast, cold emptiness. She turned off the TV. Her recovery was the hardest thing she had ever done. Dr. Eris, her toxicology specialist, was kind but firm. "We are flushing your system, Alara, but the physical detox is the easy part. The real work is in your mind. The fog was a chemical prison. Now you have to learn to walk in the open again. Your memories, they're all there. They were just inaccessible. They're going to start coming back, and it will hurt." He was right. It happened one night a week in. She was trying to read a book, but the words swam. She closed her eyes. And she was back. Not in the courtroom, but in her kitchen. 6 months ago. She's holding a glass of water. It's a hot day. She's so thirsty. "Darling," Marcus says, his voice like silk. He's holding her wellness smoothie. That metallic-tasting health drink. "Don't fill up on water. Drink this. I made it. Especially for you." She remembers smiling at him, thanking him. "You take such good care of me, Marcus." "Always," he'd said, kissing her forehead. His eyes, she now remembered, were cold. So cold. She broke down, not in rage, but in grief. She grieved for the woman who smiled and drank the poison. She grieved for the 15 years of marriage she now saw as a grotesque lie. She had not just been a victim. She had been his willing, trusting fool. The shame of it was as toxic as the lithium. It was David Chen who broke through it. He visited her looking awkward in the sterile hospital room. He was carrying his old, battered briefcase. They gave me this back," he said, patting it. "My license is officially restored. The DA dropped the blackmail charges. With prejudice." "Thank you, David," she said, her voice stronger than it had been. I brought you something," he said, pulling out a file. "I wanted you to see it, not just hear it." He laid out copies of receipts. A P.O. box opened in a neighboring town in Chloe Vance's name. An online order from a wellness website in Estonia for 500 grams of lithium orotate powder. A receipt from a chemical supply store, the kind that sells to high school labs, for the heavy metal binder. All paid with a prepaid credit card. All shipped to Chloe's P.O. box. They thought they were so clever, David said, his voice laced with disgust. Untraceable. But they had to get the mail. I pulled the security footage from the post office. A full month's worth. He placed a final 8x10 on her bed. It was Chloe, in a blonde wig and sunglasses, nervously looking over her shoulder as she unlocked the little box. He thought I was a prop, Ilara whispered, tracing the outline of the wig. She thought I was an obstacle. She looked up at David, and the grief was gone, replaced by something hard and bright. They both forgot I was a person. The civil trial was a formality. Marcus and Chloe, on the advice of their new, overworked public defenders, pled no contest. They couldn't fight the recording. They couldn't fight the toxicology report. They were trying to save their energy and any scrap of dignity for the criminal trial. Ilara was there. She sat in the front row, poised in a dark, structured dress. Judge Evelyn Reed presided, and in the sterile civil courtroom, she was every bit the queen. A contract, Judge Reed declared, her voice ringing with contempt as she held up the pre-nuptial agreement, is built on the foundation of good faith. Mr. Hayes and Ms. Vance did not just act in bad faith, they acted in criminal faith. This document, which sought to protect Mr. Hayes's assets in the event of a divorce, is predicated on a marriage that was in its final year a fraud, an act of prolonged malicious assault. She tore the document in half. The sound was a sharp rip in the silent room. This prenuptial agreement is not just void. It is an insult to the institution of marriage and this court. She awarded Ilara everything. The house, the stock portfolios, the pension funds. And then she went further. It is the opinion of this court that Ilara Hayes is not just entitled to her half, or even the whole of the marital assets. She is entitled to reparations for the time, the health, the career, and the human dignity that were stolen from her. I am therefore awarding punitive damages in the amount of $20 million to be seized from any and all current and future assets of both Mr. She corrected herself. Of Marcus Hayes and Chloe Vance. The gavel slammed. Ilara didn't smile. She just breathed. For the first time, it felt like her own air. The criminal trial was 6 months later. The transformation was complete. The woman who walked into courtroom 3B, the same room where she had collapsed, was not Ilara Hayes, the politician's wife. She was just Ilara. Her hair was cut in a sharp professional bob. She wore a tailored navy blue suit. The frail woman was gone. She had been working out, and her strength was visible. Her eyes, clear and bright, missed nothing. The new defense lawyers were trying the only strategy they had left: turn them against each other. Marcus Hayes, a man under immense public stress manipulated by this ambitious younger woman, one argued. Chloe Vance, a young woman in love, unduly influenced by this powerful sociopathic man, the other countered. It all fell apart when Ilara took the stand. The defense lawyer, a man named Green, tried to be gentle. It was a fatal mistake. Mrs. Hayes, Ilara, it must have been so terribly confusing. All that stress. You must have been so unstable. Ilara locked eyes with him. The courtroom disappeared. It was just him and her. Mr. Green, she said, her voice not loud, but carrying to every corner of the room. Let's be precise. Unstable is when a table has a wobbly leg. Confused is when you can't find your keys in the morning. I was not confused. I was poisoned. I was not unstable. I was the victim of a coordinated malicious chemical assault designed to mimic instability. A plan, she said, turning her head slightly to look at the jury, concocted and executed by the two people sitting at that table. She looked back at the lawyer. They did not think I was crazy. They knew I was sane. They worked methodically for 6 months to make me crazy, to erase me. She leaned forward, her voice dropping, but a cold fury burning in it. They failed. I am still sane, and I am still here. Do not ever call me unstable again. Mr. Green looked at his notes. He looked at the judge. He looked at the jury, who were all staring rapt at Ilara. No further questions, Your Honor. He sat down. The jury was out for 45 minutes. Guilty. On all counts. Conspiracy. Aggravated assault. Fraud. Perjury. Marcus Hayes collapsed. The man of the people was gone, replaced by a weeping, whimpering shell. He tore at his restraints, his face purple. He screamed at Chloe. It was your idea, you witch. You told me it was safe. You ruined me. And Chloe, who had been empty, looked at him. And a horrifying, dry, broken laugh came out of her. My idea. Oh, Marcus, you loved it. You loved watching her fade. You loved it more than you ever loved me. The mutual destruction was complete. Judge Reed, who had requested to preside over the sentencing, was grim. You two represent a fundamental failure of the human heart, a darkness this court cannot comprehend. You will serve as an example. Marcus Hayes, 15 years. Chloe Vance, 12 years. Ilara stood on the courthouse steps. The media swarmed, but this time it was a different energy. It was respect. Mrs. Hayes, how do you feel? What's next for you? Ilara held up a hand. The crowd went silent. For 6 months, she said, her voice carrying in the clear afternoon air. I was told I was crazy. I was told I was sick, I was weak. Today the court confirmed what I and a few good people knew all along. I was none of those things. I am a survivor. A reporter shouted, What about David Chen? Ilara's face softened just for a second. Mr. Chen is a man who understood that justice isn't just a word in a law book. It's an action. His license was restored. His reputation is clear. She took a breath, a small, proud smile touching her lips. And his new firm, Chen and Hayes Investigations, opens on the 1st of the month. That got a gasp. She didn't wait for another question. She walked alone through the sea of reporters who parted for her. She didn't get into a limo. She walked to a simple dark gray sedan, got in, and drove herself away. The victim was gone. Ilara Hayes was finally at the wheel. In the end, it wasn't just about the recording. It was about a system that failed Ilara, until one person, Judge Reed, decided to look closer. It was about a man, David Chen, who lost everything, but still did the right thing. And it was about a woman who was pushed to the absolute brink, who was systematically erased, but who still had the strength to come back. The smiles of the wicked are always the first to fade when the truth comes to light. Marcus and Chloe thought they were writing her ending, but they just wrote their own. What did you think of Judge Reed's incredible move? Let me know in the comments below. This story is a powerful reminder to always trust your gut and to fight for the truth, even when the world is trying to tell you you're crazy. If you were on the edge of your seat, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel. And don't forget to share this video with someone who loves a story of justice being served. And finally, if you want to hear more dramatic stories of betrayal and sweet, sweet revenge, be sure to subscribe to the channel and ring that notification bell. We have new stories every week, and you won't want to miss a single one.